Namaskar. I'd like to begin by asking you to just bring your attention to the heart and pay attention to everything that's going on there. So we'll sit for maybe a couple of minutes paying attention there. We're going to chant Om. I will chant it and you can chant along. Just bring your palms together in this mudra. So pressing the palms together, the palms are touching gently, the fingers are touching gently, the back of the thumbs is gently touching the chest, just touching. Just hold it right here. Close your eyes, keep your back straight but not stiff. The back, neck and head in a straight line. Let the tongue fall to the bottom of the mouth. The eyes are gently closed. The expression on your face is relaxed. Now bring a quarter moon smile to your face. Hold the smile. As you inhale, travel in with your breath. Let the smile travel all the way to your heart. Now bring your attention to the hollow space between the palms. Hold it right here. Let the breath be comfortable and long, inhaling and exhaling. Pay attention to any vibration, any sensation, any energy that you're feeling in your palms. Just pay attention. As we chant Om 3 times, keep your attention right here. We're going to chant Om 3 times. Exhale completely. Take a slow, deep breath. Inhale. Om. Inhale. Inhale. Keep your eyes closed, bring your palms down into your lap. Keep your attention in the heart. Pay attention to any vibration, any sensation, any pulsation, any sense of energy or space. Feel a vibrant, energy-filled space open up in the heart. A heart filled with love, filled with a connection to the divine and a connection to each other. Feel that vibration in your heart. Namaskar. So I am to understand that you have been discussing chakras over the last, the full year so far. So I'm going to not describe the theory as much as I'll give you an introduction to myself and my own practice, my own journey as a yogi. And then I'll talk a little about the experience itself of chakras, the experience of that energy itself, and then a few practices that have helped me with cultivating the heart. I was born in India and to a religious and devout family. My father was especially spiritual and religious, spending 2 hours every morning before work. Very hard-working man, but every morning he would spend 2 hours at the altar doing his prayers and chanting, and very loving, very kind man, and very hardworking. So I learned devotional chanting from him as a little child, and then I walked away from it. because as every child grows up, you try to find your own way. And then on TV in India, this is 1980s, there would be yoga programs and meditation programs, and I would watch those and learn to practice my own. I developed my own practice of meditation as a child. Even in several family photos, I was surprised to see a few years ago when I looked at those black and white photos. I'm sitting there cross-legged with my eyes closed and my hands in this mudra. So I guess I've always been like this, is the point. So at my MBA program, as soon as I entered, this was my first time away from my family, then I started reading books on philosophy. And I hadn't read much about Hindu and Indian philosophy as such at that time. And I happened to actually borrow a book from the library, which was interesting. Then I went to a bookstore and bought a book on meditational practices. I didn't know what I was buying. I just bought a book. And then from that book, I learned meditation. And for the next decade or so, that's the practice that I followed. Along the way, I picked up Hatha Yoga, so postural yoga, pranayam, initiations, and so on. And so that went along for a while. Later, over the last 15 to 20 years, I've taken initiation in different practices. So I went to, if you've read Autobiography of a Yogi, then, Paramahansa Yogananda-ji talks about this particular house in Banaras where he took initiation. Banaras is by the river Ganga in northern India. And so I took initiation in Kriya Yoga at that house. And that was a beautiful experience. And then I've also taken initiation in Qigong. Qigong is a Taoist practice, and Tibetan Bon practices, which are very powerful as well. And then I've been teaching and developing programs as well, based on other parts of the yoga system, including the meditational practices that exist in different parts of our tradition. So that's my journey as a yogi. And when it comes to chakras, there's a lot of mythology built around chakras. Of course, chakras, the way I understand them now, is we're all energy. We're all flowing energy. The energy inside us tends to flow all around all the time, but we are so engrossed in this physical world that you can touch and feel and see that we don't really learn how to tune into the internal systems. But that energy is what animates us, what motivates us, that moves us. And that energy tends to flow through the body. And just the way water flows in the river and it turns on itself in vortexes, whirls and vortexes form within the body. And different systems have different numbers of chakras that they recognize. The wall over here, this representation of 7 chakras is from the Hatha Yoga schools, where 7 chakras are recognized. And each chakra, and I'll come to it in a few moments, has its own sound, geometry, color, its own energy pattern, and its own impact on the physical self. But that's not the only school of that recognizes these chakras. In the Sufi system, I am to believe that there are 5 chakras that are recognized. And in the Taoist system, 3 main chakras are recognized. And unlike in the yoga system where the spinal column is the basis for the chakras, in the Taoist systems, the front of the body and 3 particular points are recognized and cultivated. And so different schools recognize different numbers of these energy vortexes. If you look at deeper yogic texts, they recognize more than 100, about 114 chakras. And you can make mudras like this and you've made a chakra because you've made another energy connection over here. So these chakras are, I guess, as many in number as you'd like to count. The question really is, what is the experience of the chakras? Is it enough to read about them, or can we experience what these chakras are like and about. It tends to be that there are a lot of books written about this topic, so there's a lot of material already available. But the deepest and primary source of material for understanding of the chakras is and should be our own inner experience. And that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about something I read in a book. I could, but what's the point of that? I'm going to talk to you about my own experience of understanding the chakras in my own physical being, and then some of the practices that have worked over time for me in my practices. The experience of energy flowing inside ourselves is always present. It's at the base of our experience. When you chant Om, for example, we didn't do this practice today, but I'm sure you have done previously, or I'm happy to come back and guide through that. But when you chant Om, the experience of Om itself leads to a place where there is nothing but the sound. The entire world inside and outside has dissolved away. And it isn't clear whether the sound is generating from us or we are emanating from that sound. It becomes indistinguishable in that state. And so the underlying experience of energy flowing through ourselves is always present. And that experience is in Sanskrit we call it Satchidananda. Sat is truth. Truth is that which does not vary or change with time or circumstance or context. Chit is consciousness. Consciousness is, of course, what everything exists in. And Ananda, of course, is bliss, unconditional and causeless bliss. And that experience of Satchidanand is the base experience of life. It exists, everything emanates from that experience. And so when we experience this energy flowing inside us, it is an experience of Ananda, that experience of bliss. This joy juice, so to speak, is always there. But because we have trained ourselves to live in this world, we have trained ourselves to guard and protect ourselves. We have trained ourselves to only believe that that which is outside is real. We have learned to tune out of this inner experience. So as we go into deeper meditative and yogic practices, we begin to tune back into our innermost self. And that tuning back into the innermost self reveals tremendous secrets, tremendous occasions for just surprise and miracles inside. And those can be very interesting and surprising. In my own journey, I found there have been moments where I'm just sitting somewhere and then suddenly tears begin to roll. And these are not sad tears, these are not happy tears, they're just tears, and they keep rolling, like a cloud right outside that's filled with rainwater and it needs to burst, and it begins to burst and dissipate. And those tears begin to flow on their own. On other occasions, when I'm deeply engrossed in work, a certain amount of tingling, spider sense-like but better, a certain sense of tingling just radiates through the body, and sweating begins to happen. Tremendous sweating. There's a word which is a very weird sounding English word, it sounds a little better in Sanskrit, which is horripilation. Horripilation, of course, is the raising of hair on the back. And so this arousal state begins to set in. In Sanskrit we call it Romaharshana, the hair stand on end. And that's an experience that comes in on its own as well, which is that arousal, of course, you can get into that state of arousal when you're fearful. But you can also get into that state of arousal at other times, and that is a different state of being. There is then there are sounds that one experiences. A lot of these, so with each chakra, you're seeing on the chart over here, there's a color associated with it. There is a geometry, whether it's a triangle facing down and up. So it's female energy, male energy, whether it has a certain number of petals, those petals are pointing down or up. Those are all experiences that you can have by going within. And so there is a sound that is associated. But not only is there a sound that you experience through chanting, there's also a sound that you can hear by itself. And that sound is the sound of silence, and it's really, really loud when time comes. And that sound, some people report the tingling of bells or the pressing of the striking of a gong. And this chakra, of course, is the anahata chakra, the unstruck chakra, and the sound is gong-like in its experience. But you can also experience as colors, as shapes and sounds, and as shapes of light that you can see all around. One time. I'm just describing the different types of experiences of chakras. So the shapes and the shapes and colors is interesting because that used to be my primary practice as a child, just bringing about those shapes and colors in my consciousness and being able to retain a particular pattern of this light. More is an experience of space itself, space of a certain type, space of a certain size, and a space of a certain quality, which is hard to describe. Sometimes you might feel that you're very much the planet Earth itself. Sometimes you might feel an infinity of space in all directions. Sometimes you might feel both and be confused by that. Sometimes, when I was a child, I used to see this more frequently than I do now. Sometimes I would close my eyes and I would see, you were talking about the Agnya chakra, right? So if you see the chakra over here, 2 petals. And so I can see, and I'm a skeptical sort of guy. I trained as an engineer, so I'm not going to take anything because somebody said it's the case. But I would see, the yin and yang symbol? The black dot and the white dot that are chasing each other. There are 2 petals that are rotating at a certain frequency, I think 3 times a second. And that is a very distinct pattern that you can see and experience quite directly. And then, you're not seeing this over here, there is an entire experience of almost X-raying yourself. You can feel yourself and all the nadis, all the internal channels that they show on charts. And I didn't bring any along right now, but if you look for it, you can experience every one of those nadis. But all that requires is continuous practice of cleansing. Because the chakras are energy vortexes that are sometimes blocked. And the practice of cleansing unblocks those energy vortexes, and then everything begins to flow. And when everything begins to flow, health results, happiness and bliss results automatically. And different schools of yoga, whether it's Taoist practices or Tibetan Bon practices or Buddhist practices or Hindu practices or Sufi practices, all these mystical schools have different practices as ways of cleansing these channels and letting the energy flow into its natural state. Now, one final thing I'll talk about the experiences is there are often times when, if you've seen Iron Man, the comic movie, he has a whatever, some object placed over here, which is his nuclear power source. That experience is a very common experience in yogis, which is over here in the heart. This heart chakra is the most vibrant chakra that you can feel, you can experience at a distance, and you can experience at a distance in other people as well. And that experience is similar to Iron Man. You can feel this energy vortex in your chest. I feel it right now, but I can also feel it outside, and it radiates out. It also receives. And so I experience other people through this chakra as well, because I can experience your presence in my own heart. Now, in the Hindu tradition, especially the Vaishnava tradition, which is if you've seen the Hare Krishnas, the practice of devotional chanting is important, and I'll come to that in a second. The reason it is important is the first point I'd like to make. The practice is designed for only one purpose, and that purpose is Cheta Darpana Marjana. And this is a Sanskrit word, and I'll explain what that means in English. Chet is the same thing that I said earlier, which is consciousness. Darpana is a mirror. And Marjana is the process of polishing something. So when you wash dishes, you're polishing them, Marjana in Sanskrit. Polishing the mirror of the heart. So when we chant the holy name, whatever your holy name is that works for you, that is the polishing of the mirror of the heart. Why do we need to polish the mirror of the heart? The mirror of the heart is occluded, it's shielded, because we do it for our own protection. We do it because we want to protect our individualized self from the other. Because we are trained, as soon as we are children, we are taught, this is my ear, this is my nose, these are my eyes, this is my lips, this must be me. That is not you. This separation is trained and conditioned into us from childhood. So by the time we've grown up, we understand and identify as a separated being. And we spend all our energy in protecting this separated being. That, I think of it as a formation of a plaque around the heart. You know how teeth, they have plaque, and the dentist has to remove that plaque? We are essentially building walls around the heart to protect ourselves from other people. We narrow the heart. We build walls around the heart. And over time, that becomes our lived condition. It is the cage within which we seem to protect ourselves, but we have encaged ourselves into our heart. This heart is a small, narrow place. And now, to truly experience bliss, we need to break free from this cage. This heart chakra has become narrow, the energy flow has become viscous or not flowing at all, and the heart feels hard. And the practices are the practices of coming here, the practice of us communing together, are all ways of trying to cleanse the heart, polish the mirror of the heart. And there are many practices to do that. The objective is all the same, which is removing the artificial boundary that separates me from you, recognizing our inner and outer connection, our obvious connection, recognizing that the same energy that animates me also animates you. The same energy that gives me this physical form is giving you this physical form, and recognizing our inner connection, letting all barriers drop, we feel a sense of coming home. We no longer need to go anywhere, we just need to be. And that gives us tremendous flowing of bliss. And that leads to those states of the ecstatic tears that are coming out of the eyes. It leads to this state of tremendous effusive love flowing from the heart in all directions. It leads to the state of the trembling, the sweating, the raising of the hair, all of those are external symptoms for this experience of love. So what are the practices that we can get to open our heart? There are so many practices. And in the traditions I've learned and the tradition I was born in, all of those practices are mixed together into a sort of lifestyle. I'll talk about a few of those. But first, let me actually talk about the language of poets. We all know the heart chakra from the language of poetry. We know the heart chakra from common language. When somebody says, this is a hard-hearted person or a cold-hearted person, we actually understand what that means. We understand that their heart has become this lump, hard and cold, that is unwilling and unable to process our mutual connection. When we say somebody is warm-hearted, somebody is courageous because they're large-hearted, what does that mean? It means that their chakra is open wide and they no longer distinguish between their own well-being and our well-being. They are essentially one with us. And that's why when somebody, so if you're a large-hearted person and I say I like your pen or your hat, you will give it to me because you don't separate between this body owning a hat and that body owning a hat. It's all my body. And whether it's on my head here or my head there, it's all the same. And so we know these words. We know what it means to have a heavy heart. A heavy heart is always sinking. A heavy heart is always just rock solid and feels like a stone somebody's put here. We know what a broken heart is. They all refer to the same thing, which is the heart chakra not being open. We know what a sad heart is because a blocked heart gives rise to a cycling of energy in the head. So our thoughts are racing around each other. Right? What are those thoughts? After a while, those thoughts tend to be negative thoughts. We tend to find ourselves in a negative spiral of thoughts. All of these are examples of things we already know from other domains of life, but they all link back to the heart chakra. And the opening of the heart chakra then becomes an important practice for modern living and in fact living at all times of history. So what are some of the practices that I've come through? I talked about tears as a way of dissolving the plaque around the heart. Now, how can we get these tears? We can get these tears when we're sad. When the heart is really overloaded, it helps to cry. And those tears remove all the impurities around the heart, and we feel our heart has lightened. But how can we cry? We don't want to wait for those sad things to happen for us to cry. We don't want to sit in a room, darkened room for days, moping, because we're waiting to cry to lighten the load of the heart. What is a better way to cry? A better way to cry is to cry in love, to cry in happiness. And so in our tradition, and what I saw here as well, devotional chanting is very important, because that devotional chanting can often lead to this state of unconditional bliss, of tears flowing through the eyes. I remember this time, this was now 27 years ago. Like I said, I was doing my MBA program, and I was just lying down in my room. On a few rooms down the hall, somebody had their TV or radio turned up. This is the 90s, no internet in India. And on the radio, they were playing a particular devotional song. It's a Sufi. Sufis are Islamic people, but this was and Sufis in India are a mix of Islamic and Hindu beliefs. So Hindu Bhakti system and the Islamic Sufi system interact very closely. And this was a song which was right in the middle, a Sufi song that Hindus really like. And it's a devotional song. It was playing in something 2 rooms down my dorm room. And I suddenly found myself with no explanation, just crying tears. There's nothing, no sadness, no grades that are falling, nothing is going on except tears are welling up and coming out, and tears are welling up and coming out. And since then, I've had that experience with other songs, other devotional songs. And those lead to the state of lightness of heart, a bouncy, warm heart, which is open and wide. Singing can cause that as well. How do we know that? Because mothers sing to their children. That singing, we understand and recognize singing before we understood and recognized words. That singing allows us to bring our attention to our heart and just be there. Fire rituals are often used for the same purpose. If you've actually sat at a fire ritual, you will feel that your heart has opened up. So in the Hindu tradition, we have, some parts of the Hindu tradition, we have Sundays are the days of the fire rituals where we'll sit. But you probably experience at a bonfire as well. But sacredness is important because it sets the mood and the context for that. So fire rituals are very powerful. And then what you feel is the heart itself is on fire in that experience. What else? And then being in the presence of someone sacred, a guru, for example, can lead to the opening of the heart. Many people experience that as many people that follow their guru and really love their guru have that experience where they feel that the guru is like the sun radiating out and they're basking in that glory. They can feel that heart. In my experience, people feel the other person's presence before they feel their physical presence. So before you enter a room with someone, you actually know that you're entering a space. You don't know they're there, but you can feel that space. And that can also lead to opening of the heart. In some traditions, for example, when I took my initiation into Kriya Yoga, my guru touched the chakras to transmit and open energies in those chakras, and that is done as well. What are some of the other ways? Love is a very powerful and potent way of opening and expanding and keeping the heart open. And love can be between people. When you love someone, your heart goes out to them, and you literally feel a tugging of energy from right here to that other person. And in the tradition, that has been used tremendously. In the tradition, stories are important. So you will hear stories. We are told stories as when we were children about deities and heroes, and we began to know them just as well as we know ourselves. And those stories become important because those stories are our connection to those deities or those heroes, and our heart goes out to them. And that becomes a very important way to open the heart as well in a communal way. Communal singing is a very important way of opening the heart. And finally, clapping together is a way to open the heart as well. The heart chakra goes through into the hand, so the power of the hand. So in the Hindu tradition, you're going to see a lot of deities with their hands in a blessing mode like this. And that blessing mode is energy that you can feel radiator-like, that heat coming out of that hand. And so the hands are connected to the heart. So when you hold a warm drink, and there's a scientific study which I was surprised but not surprised to read also, which was when you're meeting people, does it help to have a cold drink in your hand or a warm drink in your hand? And it turns out when you're meeting people for the first time and you want to have a friendly meeting, buy a coffee. Hot coffee. Having a warm drink in the hands opens up the chakra here, which opens up the heart. And so you feel a sense of warmth oozing out of the heart, and that allows you to connect to the other person as well. So clapping is very important. So in the devotional practices in my tradition, we would combine all of these together. We would be told stories of divinity. So baby Krishna. Now here's another thing. The love that we experience doesn't need to be amorous love all the time. It doesn't need to be a lover on the other side. Love can be in every shape and form. You can love your friends. You can love your country. You can love your mother. You can love your child. You can love an idea, right? All of these are forms of love. And in the tradition, the stories that we're told are interestingly very different. If you're a parent type, baby Krishna stories are beautiful because he's naughty, he's always getting into trouble, and those stories create this sort of affinity and love that can be used to advantage. So stories are taught, singing together is practice. I'm bringing it all together finally. And then because we know the stories, we connect with that which we are singing about. We're singing together, that's another form. We are clapping and we are holding the silences in the middle of all the clamor, the excited chanting that is going on. All of those work to open the heart. And that's why in the Hindu tradition we say that without this you don't even feel hungry. Without this, the heart is not satisfied. And so you have to keep coming back to these practices to reconnect, reopen the heart, because as soon as we walk out of this building, the heart is going to close again because the conditioning sets in. The separation that we have from other people sets in. The protective shield that we create around ourselves sets in, and the heart once again begins to close. And so the experience of chakra, I've experienced that as the flowing of sort of a viscous, warm liquid flowing through my veins. I can feel the blood flow. I can feel that energy and warmth flow. And I experienced the blockage as well. Over the years and decades of being a yogi, I now know a little bit more about my body. When I have food that I don't like, I'm vegetarian, I've never had alcohol, so, but even within that narrow range of food items, if I have food that makes me angry or aggressive, then my heart begins to not feel good. I feel a sense of blockage. And then I have to go back to my practices to open the heart again. And so all of these lead to a system of living. All of these lead to a system of practices that all you want to do is be in that state. Finally, satsang, the company of like-minded people, is highly rated in our tradition for opening the heart, as you are. And so I thank you for welcoming me with open hearts and open arms into your satsang, and I hope this has been a useful practice. Thank you.